Hello, everyone. I'm Elisa Gross, founder of Campus Risk Solutions. I'm here today with Aaron Stark, author, mental health advocate, and father of four. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
So, Aaron, as an almost school shooter, we're going to talk about this. Ironically, when this interview was arranged, we had no idea there would be a fatal school shooting today
Mm.
at the Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin. When Aaron was younger, he planned a mass shooting after years of adverse childhood experiences that led him to believe he had nothing left to lose. According to the 2023 JAMA article, Economic Burden of Health Conditions Associated with Adverse Childhood Experiences Among U.S. Adults, Peterson et al., the cost from resulting conditions is over $14 trillion a year. There are family-centric, community-based, and societal concerns that have to be addressed. But first, what makes a gunman, and are they those among us crying out for help? Aaron, I'm so glad you're here to talk about prevention. Can you tell us about your parents and life growing up?
Absolutely. First off, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on. Um, I grew up in a really drug addicted, violent, nomadic kind of life. I had a birth father who was extremely violent for the first 5 years of my life. I experienced some of the most intense abuse a person can. Um, it was a life of struggle and pain. And I think as far as the adverse childhood experiences go, when I look at the ACEs list, I look at it and I see the 10 check marks for what children go through. I think I went through all of them right from the very beginning. My birth father was from Vietnam. He was went to the Vietnam War, served in the Vietnam War, and when he was there, I guess, he went through his own trauma that was extremely damaging. And by the time I was born, he was just a drug addicted, violent monster. And one of the very first memories I ever have in my entire life is me laying on my mom as I'm trying to scream at him that he just killed her. And she wasn't dead, but he had beaten her bloody and unconscious. And that's the start of my entire life. And that coming from there throughout a life, the first 5 years with him was just like an abject Stephen King horror movie, like the worst kind of violence. Then my mom got away from him, got with my stepdad, and it went from Stephen King to like Scarface. It went from violence to crack cocaine and crime, and they would they didn't believe in hiding anything, so they would just pull out the electric skillet and rock up crack right in front of me and my brother, and we spent our life then of getting evicted and moving, or running away from the cops and moving, or running away from social services and moving, and bouncing from state to state because it was late 80s, early 90s. And so it was before the age of the internet. And so it was easy to make a new identity. So my parents would usually go from Colorado to Oregon. And if say they were in Colorado living in Denver, they'd have a house and a job, and then they would lose that house and lose that job because they stole from the job or they got caught doing drugs, move to Oregon, lie about their whole existence, make up an entirely new life, new name. 6 months go by, they lose all of that because, of course, it's all a lie. Wash, rinse, repeat. Because back then people didn't communicate. There wasn't networks, and so I never was at a school for longer than 6 months. I went to between 30 and 40 different schools in my life. I was constantly bouncing from place to place. And at the time, I was adapting really badly. I was dirty and smelly and filthy. I thought that I was just a sweet, innocent kid. I was really into reading. I read super early. I was into comic books and science books and history, and I sucked in information. I loved that. And I would have my nose buried in X-Men while my parents were right behind me beating each other up and smoking crack. And that was my escape. So growing up, I
Mm.
kind of maladapted with that. I decided that I was the filthy one. I was the um I hang on one sec, please. I'm in an interview. I know, but it's very distracting. You're looking at you as I'm sorry, it's distracting. Can we edit this? Okay. Yeah, sorry. My son just got home from school and it breaks my entire train of thought. So
I like this though, because this is real life and we're having a very open conversation. So we're
yeah,
allowing
yeah.
everything, kids, dogs, bring it.
Well, and I love that I love that he just got home. It's just when I'm in the middle of talking about my story, it just I look over to the side and I want to ask him how his day is.
Mm. They managed to sign you up for school, your parents. Somehow
Hmm.
or other, they managed to continue to sign you up for school, and you had a thirst
Yeah,
for learning.
yeah, and I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know how. I know later on they would, as I grew older, they had started encountering problems getting my records from places. But at the beginning, it was just there's that gap that you have between when the kid arrives and when the records can arrive, and the
Right,
kid's
right,
always
right.
accepted in, and you always have that gap of time. And that discovery was the reason why we had to move a couple times. That we weren't nothing lined up, nothing seemed to match what was being said, and
Right.
I
So,
was it was just very impermanent.
mhm. So tell me a little bit. I know you have a brother, and how did he
Hmm.
cope, and how was his relationship with your folks?
So we both had two different kind of characters in the family where he was utilitarian, I was the thing being used. So he was like, I was a bookworm, he was a mechanic. He was the kind of kid that would take apart skateboards, take apart a bike, fix everything. So when my parents are, by the time I am 8 or 9, my parents are entering into a deep crack addiction, and that lasted all the way through my teen years up till 13 or 14, where it was intense crack. It was right at the height of the crack epidemic, and my parents were really in the middle of that. And so my brother became very useful to my parents when there were times when he had to become the adult really early, where he there was one memory where we were getting evicted and the sheriff had shown up at the door to throw everything out on the lawn, and so they're busy throwing all of our stuff on in the mud, and my parents aren't home, they're at the bar getting drunk. So my mom and my stepdad are at the bar. My brother, who's 2 years older than I am, I think I'm about either I'm 9 and he's 11, or I'm 7 and he's 9. We're 2 years apart. So it was one of us for 9 years old. I can't remember which one, but it was right around that age. And he was the one that had to find somewhere to put everything and get a place for me and him and all the stuff, while my mom and my stepdad couldn't be found for hours at the bar. And so he was very useful to them, and he grew up really fast. He had to become the adult
Mhm.
really quickly. And as
Mhm.
we grew older, at the same time that when we came into our teen years, dealing with the family was, I rebelled. I didn't like anybody in the family. I wasn't, I didn't share interests with anybody. I, I didn't fit in. I was always the black sheep. And that was like a joke, a running joke, that I was the outcast. Whenever we would watch a movie and there's like some outcast kid on the movie, that I was that one. Everybody was like, oh, there's Aaron. He's over there.
Mhm.
And so he kind of joined in the fun. So by the time I'm 14 and he's 16, the house becomes a party house for his teenage friends, and they become the drug dealers for my parents. And I am homeless on the streets, bouncing around trying to survive and scrounging and gathering very toxic subgroups of people around me, very toxic friend groups. And I don't even really call them friends. I call them disaster groupies, because they kind of wanted to live vicariously through my
Mhm.
darkness, like see how far they
Mhm.
could push me. And
Mhm.
that by the time I'm 14 years old, I am I'm on the streets, self-harming. I'm charismatic and intelligent because I had to adapt at being like I had to become a chameleon at the different places I went.
Mhm.
So when I'm moving from
Right.
school to school, I had to adapt to the different social situations. So because of that, not only was I able to talk easier, but I was I had outside experience that was alien to the kids around me. So if I could just have a day where I just would talk about the reality of what was happening in my world. Like, yeah, my parents beat themselves up today or smoke crack or whatever. And it would turn into a oh my God, what? Like it would get attention and
Hmm.
affectation. And for me, it was
Hmm.
just it turned into at first it was kind of seeking attention, and then it quickly became using that my pain is kind of like a party favor, like using it that like if that's what I'm good for, then here's all the pain that I got, and
Right.
using that as a survival technique.
Hmm. I want to ask you about extended family members, particularly
Hmm.
grandparents, because they play in many people's lives a very important role in terms of giving love and stability and guidance and perspective. Did you have these extended family members in your life, and were they aware of your circumstance?
So I had in both of the places we were moving, that was kind of the places we were bouncing between was areas of family. So in Denver, my we have my
Mhm.
stepdad's family, and they were very extremely dysfunctional and alcoholic and drug addicted, all of them. That was the places where there would multiple crack dens in the siblings of my stepdad. So there were lots and lots of that and lots of abuse. And all the grandparents on that side, my stepdad's dad was born in like 1907. And by the time I was around, he was just an old blind man who was mean and racist and just was just mean all the time. And his mom was one of the most vicious alcoholics I have ever seen. Like I watched her stab her son or my stepdad's brother in the gut with a broken beer bottle. Like I there that violence was intense. And then on in
Mhm.
Oregon was my mom's side, and that was my grandma and grandpa, and they were also very racist. I didn't figure that out till I was later on, but they were also very racist. They ran antique shops up in Oregon. They ran a series of antique stores up the down the coast. And as the by the time when the internet was starting to hit, they closed all their stores down, put everything up on eBay. But this at this time, the stores were still open. They were still running antique shops. But they were they were farm people and very that the Oregon time because I went up there to stay for a year is kind of like a split. When my mom left from my father, she sent up to Oregon to like escape, stay with my grandparents for a year, and that the abuse and violence coming from that family is pretty epic. Like my uncle is a pedophile rapist who I witnessed rape a 4 year old and the 4 year old's mom, and the um I wasn't there like physically witnessing it in act. He was in a truck outside my aunt's house and was discovered while I was like it was all an incident while I was there. So I didn't have to sit and watch that, but I did watch him then come in and kick my aunt, his sister, who was pregnant in the stomach. And he was just a vicious, violent guy. And my great grandfather was also a pedophile rapist who raped all the women in the previous generations. And at that, there was a relative of mine who is an aunt who is in the only one in that side who I ever have any connection with. And she's kind of like the me of the previous generation, where she tried to come out and talk and she got crushed. They just smashed her. She was beaten down physically, emotionally, mentally. They just crushed her will. And so she's now one of my biggest supporters coming out talking about it. And the so I never was close to anybody. I was never close to any of my extended family at all. There was that aunt that I was close to, and then my cousins who were younger. And I also have twin sisters who are 10 years younger, who I very rarely ever mention. But anybody younger than me, I hold absolutely no ill will towards whatsoever because they weren't a part of any kind of abuse. They were just victims the same way
Right.
and
Right.
to various extent throughout the family. And the my aunt, I saw her try to escape, and I saw the damage that was done. And it was other than that, I only the only
Mhm.
lessons I ever learned from my family was what not to do and what not to be and who not to act like. And I made it
Right.
very plain early on, like 16, 17, straight up to their faces that I will never be like you people, that I don't like any of you. You are not my family. I don't like you. And the only ones that I stayed close to because it because of life was my mom and my stepdad. And because it was my mom. Like how can I leave my mom? And that I wasn't able to fully get away from her until my mid 30s. Yeah.
I hear this strand of strength, though, within you that was ready to not have more of the same. So that's really positive. Even if that
Yeah.
was just like getting squelched, it was there. It was there, a little
Yeah.
fire saying, I have the pilot on here and I'm not interested
Hmm.
in this.
I
Yeah.
was not interested. And by the time now we're going to mix up the time frames here because it's a progression. So when I'm 14, 15, 16 years old, I had that escapism, but it was a much more nihilistic, like, I'm just going to burn everything down. Like, this isn't worth anything. I'm not worth anything. Everything should go away. That kind of, like, let's just destroy it all kind of feeling. And but that was after. So 14 years old, I'm homeless. I'm cutting myself. That leads up to the time between 14 and 16, comes up to the time where my personal dark progression and slide like accelerates, like just goes so fast because when I go homeless, I'm kind of living three different lives and I have a severe dissociation. When I was 12 years old, I met one of the only good portions of my entire life. This kid named Mike. And Mike was a kid that he was 10, I was 12. We met at a comic book shop and we immediately hooked up. We became best friends right away. Like he happened to live at the opposite end of the block that I was living at the time. And so we went back to his house and I pretty much never left. Like we just immediately clicked. Deep conversation in comic books. We would just have the same kind of wavelength of our thoughts. And he was a total opposite life of mine, like polar opposite. Like he was very well to do. His family was very well off. His mom was a lawyer. His dad was a computer programmer, and they live in this big four-story house with a big yard. And he never moved, and he always got what he wanted. And like he he just had a very stable, loving environment. And so he became kind of my home base because at 12 years old, we hooked up. That's right at the start of me gaining kind of awareness of what's going on and a little more personal agency that if I
Mhm.
want to run away, I physically possibly can. You know,
Mhm.
before before 12, I'm powerless to just kind of swim in the
You're a
chaos of what
kid.
they throw at me. Yeah, I'm a kid and even at 12 I still am, but I start to see, and I start to gain more autonomy. And then
Mhm.
by the time I'm 14 years old, he's been my home base. So as I'm bouncing around to all these places, going from chaotic house to chaotic house, he never moves. And so I have in my day as a 14-year-old, I would wake up in a field or behind a dumpster or on some person's couch. And I would get up and I would probably be in a really toxic place at the start of my day on almost inevitably because I rarely spent the night at Mike's house because I was just there during the afternoon. And so I would go over there and wake up in either the disaster groupie house with a bunch of kids who have done drugs all night long and are trying to escape their own depression and their own pain, and me waking up with fresh cuts and blood on me or whatever the filth from the night was. Or I would wake up at my mom's house because I was like 80% homeless, because I all my stuff
Mhm.
was there, and I would go there to recharge.
Mhm.
And so very rarely I would wake up there, but I would probably wake up to screaming and fighting and crack and all this chaos there. Or I would just wake up alone on the streets in like in the rain or snow and get up. And that would be the start of my day. And then I would go to between three different lives, where one life for a little bit of time I would have Mike's house, where I'm like a regular kid. Just I can talk about regular things. I can watch a cartoon, maybe have a drink or a little plate of food, have a little bit of a normal day. And then I would go to my mom's house, where I'm just an abject piece of crap, filth, worthless, should be thrown on the streets. Why am I even there? And when she does communicate with me, it's either to ask me for something or to threaten me with the worst possible violence. Like if I don't do what she wants, well, then I'm going to kick your ass and get you out. Like she would just threaten to beat me up and throw me on the streets and then never follow through with anything. So none of her threats ever amounted to anything, and unless she was completely hammered, then she would physically attack me. And the ratio of that was pretty high. Even first thing in the morning, she still had a high chance of that happening. And then I would go to these disaster groupie house, where I'm like this weird dark unicorn, and I'm now living this weird celebrity that I have because of all the pain that I have in the other life. That now I have lived this weird life that no one else has, and using it as a party favor. And that kind of chaos is very unsustainable. And I that disaster groupie house gets bigger and bigger, and I start doing more stuff there because I get a daytime job working at a pizza place. And my pizza place manager is my drug dealer, where I'm buying LSD from him and having all these big parties, everybody tripping acid. And then that house ends in a big explosion, where all the people have to leave because the parents come in. I have like 14 kids tripping acid at a party. There's another 10 of them playing with a band. There's one kid had a birthday. Because the house that we're living in, one of the kids' dads paid the rent and bought the food, but didn't live there because he was staying with his girlfriend, because dysfunction is everywhere. And so it
Mhm.
was just a teenage flop house. And so
Mhm.
parents get there, that everybody has to go, party's over. They all get to go home. I don't get to go home because I'm in the middle of a giant screaming, drugged out fight with my mom. I'm tired of that abuse, so I can't go home. So now I'm on the streets. And the self-harm that I'm doing starts to really increase, because I started cutting myself, because when I'm in that sloshing around of the chaos where it's just swimming me around, when I would cut myself, those waves would kind of recede and everything would kind of calm down. And even though I knew it was terrible, it was destructive, it was real and it was mine. And that has how it started. But then very quickly, it started to become like a self-punishment, where now I'm slicing deeper and deeper. And now it's more like, can this be suicide? Like it was going more towards that area, and it was very, very destructive. And at the same time that I'm losing all of my structure for anywhere to even stay, even in the chaos, now the only place I have left is the shed behind Mike's house, because nowhere the weather's too bad. I can't stay on the streets. And the behind Mike's house there was a tool shed, and they had a big recliner chair there. And that would be like my last ditch place. Most nights Mike had no idea I was even there, and I would just kind of sneak into the tool shed and sleep, um, because I knew no one in that family was going to wake up. I knew what their plans were. I've been around them for years and years. And so the night finally comes where I'm cutting myself really, really bad, and it's raining, and there's a big pool of blood on the ground. And I'm like, I have to do something or I'm going to die. If I don't get some help, I'm going to die. And so when dawn broke, I knocked on Mike's back door and I borrowed a bus fare and a phone book from his mom. And I called social services on myself. And that, because they had been one of the places that had tried to intervene a couple times. They had tried to step in and were one of the reasons why we had to move. Like social services were a, a peril that my parents always told me I had to watch out for. And so but I'm like, if I call them on myself, maybe they can help. So in the morning, when dawn broke, I called the social services department. I looked up in the phone book, set an appointment for like 3 or 4 that afternoon. And when I got there, they had contacted my mom, and my mom was there too. And we sit around at this big table, and there's counselors at one side and me and my mom at the other side. And they ask me, so what are we here for? What's our problem? And I tell them, well, this is my problem. And I lift up my arm and I have fresh cuts and I throw a bloody razor blade on the table. And they said, that's my problem. I feel like I'm nothing. I feel like I'm worthless. I feel like there's nothing for me. And my mom tells them that, oh, I'm just making it all up. It's all just to get attention. Yeah, I just do it to get a rise out of people. It's not a big deal. She can handle it. It's not a problem. And they send me home with her. And we get a couple blocks away from the place, and she turns to me with this evil look on her face. Next time you should do a better job, and I'll buy you the razor blades. And I was like, okay, you think that I'm a monster? I'll show you what that is now. And up till that point, I always, even at the time, I described it like I was wearing the darkness like a blanket, like I would wrap it around me. It was spiky and it was hard, but it was mine, and I could wrap it around like an armor. But that time, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna dive right in. You want to see what it's like? I'll show you what a monster is. And so for 9 months, I went on what I call scorched earth, where I went and tried to destroy my own life socially and to see how much I could make everybody else's opinion of me match what I thought myself was. And so I would offend and degrade and say the worst sexist and racist and disgusting things, not because I was sexist or racist, just because I thought that would offend you. If it offended you, I would do the thing that offended you the most, whatever it was. I would go to the limit that would break your offense. That was my goal. And I also at that time, over that 9 month period of just trying my best to ruin friendships and ruin relationships and just push myself into the dark where I knew I belonged. I also went into every family member I could and snuck in or charmed my way in and got into their photo albums in their closets and stole all the pictures of me out of them. And then I took them and put them in a big pile and burned them. And I was trying to erase myself. And so after 9 months of that, I am now completely alone. I burned every single friend group and everything, every bridge I could. And I'm now alone in this field behind this big pink Mexican restaurant here in Denver called Casa Bonita. It's this big theme restaurant here. And behind it, there was a field. And the reason why I wanted to lay there was because there was a little dip in it. And if you laid in the dip, you couldn't see me if you were driving around the street. So it didn't look like there was a body out there. It just, you could just lay there like urban camping. And so I was alone, and I had been there for about a month staying in that field. And I was surviving by stealing from the dumpster up at the top of the hill and stealing free samples from the grocery store. I hadn't changed my clothes in weeks, hadn't taken my shoes off in weeks, but I also wasn't wearing any socks. So my feet were just rotting off my body. I was evading the police during the day to avoid truancy officers. And it was terrible. And I woke up one morning in the snow, and it was like 2 inches of snow on the ground that I woke up in. And I was freezing so bad that the 2 block walk to get up to the top of the hill, I was shaking like I was in a seizure, just like, oh my God, I couldn't even move. And I get up to the top of the hill and I go wash myself off in the bathroom. And I'm looking, I can't even recognize myself in the mirror. And I'm like, if I don't do something, I'm going to die. And so across the street from the school that I was attending at the time, that's attending in very loose words. I was enrolled there, but I wasn't really attending. Was a building that said mental health, and I didn't know what it was for, but I knew the sign said mental health, and I knew last time when I called social services, they invited my mom in, and I'm not doing that again. So I'm just going to go in cold. And so I went in, and they had me meet this woman. She was a young woman, and I don't really remember much about that one because all I remember was the very end of it when she told me, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I can't help you." And when I walked out of that room and stood on that porch, that's when I felt my brain snap like a mirror. Like it felt like shards of glass in my head. And a couple things happened all at the same time right then. Like right then, first thing that happened was I felt myself go to the bottom of whatever that chaotic swimming around thing was. and all the noise went away. It got really quiet and it got really still, and all the chaos kind of evaporated because I didn't have anything left to lose. I didn't have any more down to go to. There wasn't there wasn't another cliff to fall off of. Like this was it. And right then I knew what I wanted to do. I had talked it through with those disaster groupies because hanging out with those disaster groupie people in that house, instead of talking about sports or movies or girls, which we talked about in the beginning, as the chaos of our lives evolved in that group, we ended up talking about like mass murder. So if you're going to shoot up a school, how would you do it? And if you were going to kill 10 people, what would you do? And it turned into like this fiction where we're just kind of batting around ideas and it's like out one-upping each other. And then when I'm in that spot, all those fictions become plans, everything crystallized. Like I know exactly what I'm going to do. I've already worked through the details. I'm either going to go into the mall food court or the school food court and kill as many people as I possibly could and die by suicide by cop. Because it's important to note that neither of those places were what we call soft targets. The school had uniformed officers at the front doors at all times because of gang problems and gun violence. But it was before the age of metal detectors, so no metal detectors anywhere, and it was open campus. You can come and go as you pleased during school hours, but there was armed uniformed officers there. And then in the mall, there was a food court the food court I was targeting. There was a police station like 2 doors down from that, so it was right there. So it was just factored into the plan. Go in, kill as many people as I possibly could, and die by suicide by cop. But that wasn't really my target. That was the damage that I was going to cause to make my parents deal with creating me. My target was my parents. I wanted to make them have to deal with making the monster that I knew that I had become. That was the damage I was going to do to do that. So the people were ancillary. I didn't have specific targets in mind. I didn't have any of that. It was the damage was the target. And that in that time, now kind of like weird. I didn't think about it then. At the time, I'm in this weird chaotic space, and my brain is out of it. But looking back, I think I hit this part where I'm like saying goodbye, where I hit this weird phase where I was going to people and giving away my comic books, going to my ex-girlfriend and saying thank you for letting me sleep outside your window, going to this friend and saying thanks, like all just a lot less anger, a lot less animosity in my um what I'm doing. Like all of a sudden I'm nice to people. And it was even weirding people out. Like I'm not offensive out of the blue. And that in that I near the end of that, I went to Mike's house. And when I went there, I knocked on his door and I was in tears. I was just crying. And hang on. Are you going to work, son? Yeah. I love you. Have a great day. So when I knocked on Mike's door, I was in tears and was, I wasn't just like, I wasn't even really at the door. I knocked on the door, but I wasn't what made me was gone by this point. I was just kind of like a husk. I was like a void. Like I wasn't really tangible. And when he opened up the door, he brought me inside and language, can I say there's one curse word in this one. I just want to make sure language is okay. He kept on telling me over and over again that I was a good kid in the shit world. Is what he would kept on saying. You're a good kid in the shit world.
Mhm.
And I he brought me inside and I just sat there and bawled. And he never asked me what I was there for. He gave me a plate of food. He actually took me upstairs and made me take a shower. And I I just stayed with him. And I don't even know I didn't even think about it till recently after I came out with my story, but I don't even know why I got to stay there because I had reached the point where I couldn't even sleep at his house because I had gotten so filthy that I couldn't even stay the night anymore because if I sat on this couch, I was leaving residue and his parents were having to scrub the stain and like it was bad. So his parents didn't want me around. But I didn't leave his house for a week. And I think he went and had a conversation with his parents about, well, Aaron really needs this and he's not leaving because I think something bad's happening. But he never
Mhm.
asked. He never asked. But what he did, what I think he did for me, it wasn't that I hung out with a friend. That wasn't what saved my life. Because I stayed there for a week. I never went and got the gun. I never went and I knew where to get a gun because there was gangbangers that bought and sold drugs for my family, and I went to him and said I was gonna get me a gun. He was like, sure, get me an ounce of weed. And that was easy because even though at the time that's like
Mhm.
$300 on the streets, that my parents were drug dealers and I had druggies sleeping on their floor. So I just went there. My brother's buddy was sleeping on his floor with 3 ounces bagged up in his pocket. I just stole one of them and took it to the guy. So that was the easiest portion of this whole thing was where to get the gun. And I just had it set to where can you get me that for me in 3 days? And it was that 3 day time that I was doing this little gap in. And that the what Mike did for me was put the tiny bits of being a person on the bottom shelf of my life. Like it wasn't that I could hang out with a buddy. It was like, oh, I can like something. I can enjoy food. Like I can breathe. And even something as simple as that, when you feel absolutely erased and just like a void of a person, like you don't even belong in the crap that you're sitting in. Like you're not even worth the filth you're wearing. That to be seen as a regular person who's worthy of love and of caring, it is transformatively powerful. And I never left his house for a week. And he's still my best friend to this day. And he's the only person in this world where if he insulted my wife, I would be like, well, baby, what'd you do to make him call you a name? Because like he's earned that. And he's the uncle to my kids. And he is out of my 4 kids, Mike has been my kids' first cool present for all of my kids. The first time that my kids got a "Oh my God" on Christmas was because of Mike. Every single one of them. He finds out what they like and then gives them exactly what they want, and it blows me away. Like we've been best friends now. I'm about to be 46 years old, and he has been my friend now for 35 years, 33 years, 34 years, about around there, whatever. And in that entire time, we've never had one insult fight. We've never screamed insults at each other. Not one time in our entire life. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't been upset with each other. We've had times where we've been upset with each other, but we always dealt with it with love and compassion and respect and with knowing that we want the best for the person across from us. And it's never been, I've never had a screw you asshole moment with him ever in my life. And so yeah, and then it's important to note though. So apologies, I need to blow my nose just really quick. Sorry, I know it might sound bad from the microphone.
That's quite all
Uh,
right.
talking makes me kind of choke out sometimes. Um, so the
So
that
Mike,
was Mike.
Mike,
Mike.
thank you. Yeah, yes.
That was between the age of 16 and 17 because that took about that whole process takes about a year from beginning to end of that story. But now I want to fast forward just a bit, okay? Because it's important to note that it's not like dang, a light switch flipped, everything's better, everything's perfect. That's not it at all. It's a process.
Right, right.
And what Mike gave me was a bit of a shift. Like he was able to shift my frame just enough, and I was able to set my feet down on the ground enough to take a breath and be a person. Like it rolled the waves back on the chaos and rolled back the damage a bit and was able to like hit what alcoholics consider as a moment of clarity. Like you just hit this like peaceful bit. But the chaos at home was still the same. Drugs and chaos there was still the same. All the violence, all that was still the same. But what Mike did, I was able to stay with one of his buddies for a while, and it was able to give me just enough of a shift to give me a bit of a break. Okay. But the feelings that I had, almost immediately, I went from outwardly aggressive to inwardly depressed. Like I was ashamed and remorseful of what I had planned, but I was more depressed about it all, and all of it kind of like it. it still fed into that I'm the worthless one, but at a different level because I'm instead of I'm the worthless one way down here, now I'm up here with I'm a worth, like it's just a different gradient
Mhm.
of the pain.
Mhm.
And but as the years go on, that chaos is still at home is still the same, and the drama spins back up again, but the depression is more inward. So coming up to the night of my 19th birthday, I was planning on committing suicide. I was going to kill myself by overdose. I had bought a bunch of LSD off the streets. I had gotten a giant bag of cocaine that I stole from my mom, and I had a big bottle of pills I had also stolen from my mom. And I had copious amounts of drugs, way more drugs than were going to be needed to do the job. And my goal was to spend as normal a day as possible because I had had people try to intervene in the past. I had had people try to stop me from things, and I was tired of being the burden that everybody else had to solve. I was tired of being the problem for everybody else. And the day was trying to act as normal as possible. And at the night, I was going to go to that field behind Casa Bonita and take all those drugs and end my life. But in the daytime, I went to Mike's house because I wanted to be with my best friend. So we go there, and Mike is a very social person. He has a social circle of his own, and one of these people in this circle is a girl named Amber. Okay, they went to school together. They were both going to art institute together, and so the but she was his friend. They weren't dating or anything, but they were hanging out and go over there, watch movies, listen to music. And so I go over to Mike's house, and I have all my drugs in my pocket, and he's like, "Well, okay, we're gonna go hang out at Amber's today." I'm like, right on. That's a great last day. I'm gonna spend it with two of my favorite people and have a good last day and then go to that field and end my life. And we get there, and that wasn't what I walked into at all. I walked into a surprise birthday party for me. I walked into about 14 people singing happy birthday, and Amber had baked a blueberry peach pie and put up a bunch of decorations. And I walked right past her and dropped all my drugs in the toilet, and that was the last time I ever tried to kill myself. And you know what really is amazing about that story is that when we left Mike's house, there was no party waiting for me. I didn't find this out till years later either. There was no party waiting for me. That when we left Mike's house, he called ahead and he's like, "Hey, I got Aaron in the car. We're coming over today. It's his birthday." And my Amber already had a bunch of friends over and they were baking a blueberry peach pie. But they were a bunch of artist friends. So like, hey, our friend's having a birthday. We're gonna give him a surprise party. So they threw up a bunch of decorations in like 5 minutes time, really quick. I walked into a thing that changed my life fundamentally to my core, an experience that altered the fundamental fabric of my existence that my friend put up in 5 minutes because her friend was having a birthday party. And and Amber's also my best friend. I just was able to bring her on stage for my second TED Talk last month and finally thank her publicly for all that. And that
Mhm.
kind of friendship never dies. So yeah, you never know what one little bit of kindness you can do, what one word you can say.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
thing that is small for you could be really gigantic for somebody else on the positive and the negative.
Mhm. And also not knowing whatever's just right around the corner.
Yeah, yeah.
If you stick
Never
around
give
long
up.
enough to,
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
never give up because you never know what if imagine if I had taken my drugs in Mike's bathroom as we were getting ready to leave
Mhm. Yeah.
and I'm headed to what would have been a birthday party. That
Yeah.
yeah, I think about that sometimes. And I now fast forward to where I am now. Now I'm 45 years old and I got a beautiful wife, four beautiful kids, and none of my children are going to be able to repeat what I'm doing here because
Right.
they haven't had any of that. I, I
Mhm.
use I use what happened to me as exact examples of how to raise my own kids. I just do the opposite. So I say I love you so much it's annoying, and I'm at every single game. I'm at every choir performance, and if you have a friend, you can bring your friend over. I routinely have herds of teenagers that come over to the house. I might know two or three of them, and that's perfectly fine. And because if we're the safe place, then that's fine for me. Because one of those
There's
kids might be
very few
me.
people, I was just gonna say, there's very few people in this life that can come from one place and find themselves arriving in a different sort of life. That's just a very rare, I think, what you
I
accomplished.
just just to illustrate how much that is mind blowing to me, I went from somebody who I have a memory, and this is a bit abrupt. I have a memory of sitting on my couch while a fully kitted out sheriff is smoking crack with my mom because they were getting the drugs from the evidence locker and then reselling it back on the streets. And I have vivid memories of that happening as I'm a teenager, okay, preteen. And I also have a memory of me standing on stage at Quantico, Virginia, speaking to 450 FBI agents and giving them a 2 hour speech about my story to try to help illustrate and help shape perspectives on how people can have their world changed by simple kindness. And to think that I went from one of those worlds to the other, yeah, it takes my breath away sometimes.
Yeah, I want to say that I feel like I shouldn't speak at all because you have so much important things to share.
Oh no, ask questions,
So
or
I
otherwise I'll
am
keep on talking.
completely I'm going off my script, but what I remember once hearing a true story, reading a true story about a child who was neglected, that was left in an abandoned building in freezing temperatures, that had to have her leg amputated, that upon waking in the hospital, the first thing she asked for was her mom. So that blind love that we give our parents as a child, I mean, they have to not only have, owe something for bringing us in, because they brought the person into the world, they owe them something. But because of
Mhm.
that blind love, it's so much more, the obligations. And
It
I I'm
absolutely is.
sorry, it's not enough to say. I'm sorry that
See,
your parents couldn't give. They didn't have it to give
I
for whatever
appreciate that.
reason.
I appreciate that, but I would say that I would, as bad as my life was, I wouldn't change any of it because it made me who I am today. And what I managed to do is break the cycle because now my grandchildren aren't going to have grandparents that they hate. That's my reward is that I broke it. I won. I stopped it, and they hate me for it. They attacked me. That side of the family came after me for it because not because I'm saying something that's not the truth, just because I'm saying something. Because my response from the very beginning has been, if you're upset about me talking about what the truth of what happened to me 35 years ago, then you're not paying attention to who I am today, then I'm not the person that has a problem, and I'll stop the instant you tell me one thing I'm saying that's not the truth. And I've been doing this now for 7 years, and there hasn't been a single thing someone's came out and told me because the thing about that kind of chaos and abuse is it relies on secrecy and on someone biting their tongue because they're worried about other people's perceptions, because they're worried about being judged, and they're worried about possibly having people look at them differently. And I was worried about that when I started coming out, about maybe someone will look at me differently. And that's been the truth. Honestly, it still costs me some things to this day. It's cost me friends and family and jobs, and it's cost a lot, but it it also has made people look at me differently when I am able to now help in a way that I've never been able to help before. And you have to be able to take the good with the bad. And if I one of the most important lessons that I learned from my own family is you can't stay in that dark. If you carry that dark around with you, that will destroy you. But you can use it as a fuel. And so I use what happened to me just to fuel my own story and to fuel my kids and to make sure that it just never happens again because I'm not going to be the secret one. I'm not going to be the one that hides it anymore. So if that's, yeah.
Yeah. So as a human being, I mean, we've introduced the trauma-informed care. They stopped calling people a victim. They started calling
Uh-huh.
people a target and all of these things to show the human side of, it's a person. It's not a conglomeration of, bad experiences.
Hmm. I am not the damage that I was living in. I am the person I am now thanks to the experiences that I had and the lessons I learned from them, both good and bad. and that damage was part of
Mhm.
it. And I I I know that they've changed the terminology. I personally do always say I
Mhm.
was victimized. I was victimized
Mhm.
by family and predators that were manipulators and liars and users. And then I maladapted and I made really terrible decisions and I made really bad choices in that. And I instead of fighting against that cycle, I dove into it. Where my brother became useful with the crackheads because he got to fix things, I became useful to their damage because I let it move me around. And the only way to stop that was to step back out of it and be done with the whole lot of it. And just I'm finished with the negativity. It's even to the point where I had better insults for myself than anybody else did because I was made fun of all the time at home. So the best way to defend against that is make everybody laugh. And if I had a
Mhm.
better fat joke than you did, then I could make you laugh and you'd stop picking on me. And that, so one of the personal steps now is that we're not allowed to make self-deprecating jokes in the house. You don't get to say that you're stupid. That's
Mhm.
we're gonna pick other things to say because you're not. And
Mhm.
that's instead of just blowing off those comments like my family would do, we're like, oh yeah, yeah, whatever. He always thinks he's stupid. We always say he's stupid. Instead of doing something like that, we blow it off. We actually we'll stop and we'll dive into that. Like, no, 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 you're not. And this is why we never say that. And this is exactly what you actually are. You're actually really smart and capable and have all this great future. And the reason why we don't say that is because if you build in your head and tell yourself you're stupid all the time, then you're going to try to manifest that and show everybody that you really are.
Mhm.
And so yeah,
Mhm.
we just use it.
That's incredible. Well, with the last name Gross, so I had to teach my kids early on not to, they had to work with it. So yeah, gross, but not
Yeah.
disgusting. We signed all our cards. Really gross people. We had to go with it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I would get big flowered shirts and say that's gross.
Yeah, my mom said I said it so much growing up that, yep, I got stuck with
Yep.
it. And I got married. Yeah. So, yeah, I just want to say also, whether we say victim, whether we say target, that we have to take people's stories as credible. Don't
Hmm.
make them victimized the second time because you haven't
Absolutely.
fathomed it, you haven't gone through it, so you don't know. And then even
And
on I
oh
was
no,
just going to
I just
say, like, the
go ahead.
please go. No,
No, no, go ahead.
it's gonna. Okay, so even looking at the National Threat Assessment Center, the U.S. Secret Service, every threat, warning sign, trigger, we take them seriously unless or until proven otherwise.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think that there's another side to that too when it comes to talking about it is I'm not a fan of comparative pain because one of the first reflective things people say to when if they hear my story is, well, I went through a lot. It wasn't nearly as bad as what you went through, but I went through something bad too. And I always want to stop them when they say that. I'm like, okay, I really appreciate that and I understand where that's coming from. But the pain that I went through is equally as valid as the pain that you went through. And there's no guide stick that judges how deep this pain is. And just because
Mhm.
mine happens to seem outlandish, that doesn't mean that mine is any more impactful to me than your life has been to you, because you've been shaped by your own experiences the same that I have. And so I've just never been
Mhm.
a fan of comparative pain. But yeah, I definitely believe that the listening to the screams calling out is I think that I have no actual data to back this up because I'm not a doctor, so I'm just going to take this off of my own experience. But from what I've seen, not being heard when you're screaming out is one of the fundamental causes for wanting to go into that dark slide in the first place. That if my voice isn't even worthy of being heard, then either I'm going to stop talking and scream inside, or I'm going to find someone else that I can scream to that's going to help me. And that in the stuff that I deal with, my biggest opponent in what I'm doing is a thing that I call the negative social economy. It's the negative social world that is it's the Reddits and the 4chans and the incel subgroups and the YouTube forums and the Rumbles and the Getters and all the different sites that are on the fringe that look like small isolated islands of negativity. when in reality, it's a big interconnected web of negativity, and there's its own risk reward system and social system, and even now with X, its own funding system, and it has all of its own. You can you the same adulation and affirmation that people are craving in the regular life, because I really fundamentally believe that everybody at the heart of it wants to be told that you're going to be okay and you can make it through it. That people when that if you're not going to get that from a positive source, you're going to find that from these people. And when you do, it's going to come along with caveats where, yeah, I know you're really feeling terrible. That's because these people don't see you at all. And the normal people are never going to see you because you're something special. But the reason why they're never going to see you is because that people over there, they're the ones that are keeping you down and they're the ones that need to hurt. And that's when you end up going and hurting those people. Because when you're craving identity, if the only thing you can be is a monster, then you're going to be the best monster you can be. And you're going to fill the void that is left for you to fill.
Yeah, there is a gravitation toward negativity. I mean, we see it in the news all the time. So we do
Mm-hmm.
have to push back against that tendency. Um,
Well, and
I
even
don't know why
and
it exists,
not
but
not even necessarily the gravitation towards the negativity. I'm more just talking about the co-opting of that urge towards the negativity for more nefarious ends when it comes to mental health and kids in specific, where we have these subcultures that the kid who wants to be good is finding that good persona in a negative light and then deifying that negativity in a positive way. So then it ends up being something where the kid, let's say that you are a troll who harasses an abortion clinic so they almost close their doors. Okay. Now, if you do that and you get on the news, then you get notoriety. You can get traffic on social media. You get followers for that. If you do it good enough to where you get on the national news, now you get celebrity and you get the people protecting you. And once you hit a certain celebrity, then the negative world will come out and protect you even against backlash coming against the rest. You'll get funding and backers and lawyers and all the other stuff that you need. And it's this weird mirror image of regular society that has sprung up that is operates under the same fundamental tenets that we do, that of risk reward, of social status, of trying to climb higher and up a ladder, the same kind of things we do as a society. This negative social mirror does this same exact thing. They're just doing it towards a negative end. That we're going to tell you that you're okay and you're good, and that's how you end up with the incel in Canada who wants to really, really hate these women who he wants that says he should love them, and to prove that he's a good guy, hyper focuses on an obscure German philosopher from the 16th century that no one else cares about. Because the more he knows about this thing, the more he's special to this one subgroup of people. And it's like this weird layering of negativity. Yeah.
hmm,
I deal with them a lot
so
in the fringe world.
so how do you feel about social media impacting violence? Do you see the direct link or indirect?
I think that there's a pretty direct link, and honestly, I think that it's in a weird way. I think the grown-ups are at fault for it, and here's why. I think that when the internet was first happening, we told all of the kids, and I was told as a teenager coming up, starting to use it, be careful because that cute girl you're talking to could be a 40-year-old man. Like we all were told that. Watch out because the cute girl you're talking to is probably not a cute girl, could be a 40-year-old man. Now we as adults adopting into the social media landscape, we all seem to have forgotten that and that dynamic. And now we assume that everybody we're talking to is a 40-year-old person and probably not a 13-year-old troll. And we have lost the perspective on it, and that's being utilized to dramatically devastating ends. The biggest movers of negativity on social media are the 40 to 50-year-old men. And that for some reason, like the 30 to 50-year-olds, I don't know what it is, but I live in that social media landscape. I found it, and ever since I came out with my story, I started getting reached out to by people on the fringe and in the dark looking for help. And I found it that if I am not fluent in that world and speak the same language they do, then they're going to look at me like I'm full of crap. And I need to be able to not to prove that I'm not faking the funk. So I need to know all about what they're talking about in their own language, in their own world, and what they're doing. And that kind of push for the anger porn, for lack of a better term, and just the monetization of negativity, and that that drive that gets utilized by a bunch of different nefarious ends for it. But I don't know, on social media in particular, I think the biggest people that should get off of social media are dads. Like we should find a way to put the dads in some, like, give them dad net, give them something else that they can do themselves, because it's not interacting well with the way that the young people talk. Like it's just a weird, it's weird because the kids, all the people under 19 that I deal with, speak technology so fluently that they know that they're carrying the sum total of human knowledge in their pocket at all times. They know that everything in the one little brick in their hand has every book and every movie and every speech ever done by every person. And they can access it in a hot second. And all they have to do is know the proper things to type into it, and they can access all of the nation's world's history. And they do that to fact check everybody around and to look at what the adults think they're offering as help, and seeing where the pitfalls are. So I think one of the best things, one of the opportunities we have, is to learn it and to adopt and to get into it, because it not only will it help with communication with the kids, but there's no better way to stop something from being cool to a kid than to have a bunch of parents involved with it. And so if you find your kid involved in social media constantly, get on the social media, learn it, be on it too. It'll it there's nothing, but there's no quicker way to get a kid off of something than they get mom and dad on
Okay.
it. It's the truth.
That's
I mean, take Facebook for example. Facebook is a work case example of that. Facebook came out and started as a college speaking thing. Everybody in colleges would use it, all the dorms and stuff. Now there are hardly any kids in Facebook. It's parents and grandparents and cat videos, and like, where'd all the kids go? They went to the places where the parents can't understand, and then they made those places purposefully obtuse and ununderstandable for adults. So like Snapchat, the UI for Snapchat, the user interface is very hard to decipher without someone telling you what to do. Same thing with Instagram. It's very hard to decipher exactly what you're supposed to be doing for it. There's no tech that leads you right through it. Like, they did that on purpose to make it so where the parents who have a hard time dealing with the technology were like, "Oh, that's too many buttons. I'm gonna go back to Facebook."
okay. So I take it your kids are in what they're not very small now, are they?
No, I have 20 in January, come January, because I have two birthdays on the same day in January. I will have a 24, 21, 18, and 13-year-old. Yeah. So my youngest is 13.
Very nice. Very good.
Yeah.
And how'd you meet your wife? And then I'll let you go because I
Oh
have to
no,
know that too.
that's fine. We met actually at college. I
Uh,
went and in my 30s, I decided to start making myself better and really trying to improve my own self. So I went to college to try to get my business degree. Went to, it was ended up being a scam school, was College America. And me and my wife went there. She was going for medical assistant. I was going for business. And she's the only good thing got out of that school, because five credits before I was supposed to graduate, I discovered how much of a scam it was and ended up leaving the school. And I mean scam legitimately, because last year they lost a massive federal lawsuit with the government and were declared a scam. And all 9,000 students that went to that school got our loans reversed. So it wasn't even part of the student loan reclamation thing. It was just they lost the lawsuit. No one has to pay for it. And if you did, you get refunded. It's because I come to find out
Mhm.
the credits weren't going to transfer anywhere. They were doing really shady stuff with the
Mhm.
Department of Education. It was bad. But I
Mhm.
met my wife, and we've been happy now for 15 years. We're coming up on our 15th anniversary. So
Well, God bless you and your family. And I hope in the future I'll have new news from you and all the successes, big and small, that you're able to enjoy because you didn't end up shooting a school or shooting out at a mall or ending up in prison for
Yeah.
life, God forbid, you know.
Well, and after when I
I,
first encountered ACEs, I found out that to get back on the adverse childhood experiences thing we talked about in the very beginning, that there was some, and I could be off base because again, I'm not an expert in this, but of what was read, that the higher up you go, if you get up to like 8 or 9 on the ACEs scale, there's some like 70% chance that you're going to have a really, really disastrous life growing up. And that is not determinative whatsoever. I don't mean to say that to be determinative. But when I seeing the life that I came from, and then I'll encapsulate it with this. This is one great last little bit before we go to before you let me go, because this is a great last little story. This just happened like 3 days ago. So I was talking with my 13-year-old, okay, and we were talking about school lunches because she wanted money to go to her school lunch so because she wanted to buy chips at school. Well, we have 2 big boxes of bags of chips that we bought for them to take bags of chips to school. So we didn't want to give her money to school. She has plenty of bags of chips for home to take, but she didn't want that. And so I told her, I said, well, you can go without for a day because I never got money from my family and I never got lunch money to go take it to my school. And my daughter, my 13-year-old turned to me and looked at me stone faced completely in the moment of the argument, said, well, Dad, that's because you had a bad life. I have a good life. And that's the way we do it now. And I said, well, okay. Well, then I guess you're right. So she got money for chips the next day.
uh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and the sincerity that you bring to this topic, and the firsthand experience that you're willing to share. Just can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. And if anybody listening ever wants to contact me, email me at aaronstarkauthor@gmail.com and find me on LinkedIn or Facebook. And I go around to give speeches, so I can, if you everybody wants a speaker, contact me and I'll come speak at your place. I speak at threat assessment, threat management conferences and schools and student resource officer conferences and all over the place. So
And Aaron's a pretty big shot on TED Talks as
yeah, I
well.
have
I
two of
saw the
them now.
huge audience, huge.
Yeah, my
All
first
right.
one is up to almost
Yeah,
15.5, I think. Yeah.
fantastic. Keep trucking. That's what my father would have said in the 70s. But that's what we got to do. All right. Peace.
Thank
Bye-bye
you very
now.
much. Bye.
Thank you. Be in touch, please. Bye-bye.
Of course.